Welcome to Teaching Truth. When we lived in the northeast of England, I attended Tynemouth Sixth Form College, and in addition to taking subjects such as accounting, statistics and business management, I also undertook a one-year course in law. As part of that course, we were taken one day to the Crown Court in Newcastle to observe the proceedings of a case. The particular case that we observed had come to the sentencing stage, and we observed the accused being sentenced to jail time in Durham prison. Jail time for a couple of years as a punishment for the crime which he had committed. But imagine being taken down and being imprisoned for a crime which you did not commit. Imagine being imprisoned because of your innocence. Well, that's where we find Joseph in our reflections this week. We find Joseph behind bars because of the lies which Potiphar's wife had spun to Potiphar, and as a result, Joseph is wrongly imprisoned. Let's read of the imprisonment of Joseph and what happened to him and who he met in prison as we read together from Genesis chapter 40. Let's read the word of God together. Sometime later, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their master, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with his two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the same prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, and he attended them. After they had been in custody for some time, each of the two men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. When Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were in custody with him in his master's house, "Why are your faces so sad today?" "We both had dreams," they answered, "but there is no one to interpret them." Then Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream. He said to him, "In my dream I saw a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, it blossomed, and its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and put the cup in his hand." "This is what it means," Joseph said to him. "The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you used to do when you were his cupbearer. But when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. For I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in a dungeon." When the chief baker saw that Joseph had given a favorable interpretation, he said to Joseph, "I too had a dream. On my head were 3 baskets of bread. In the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head." "This is what it means," Joseph said. "The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat away your flesh." Now the 3rd day was Pharaoh's birthday, and he gave a feast for all his officials. He lifted up the heads of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker in the presence of his officials. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position so that he once again put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker, just as Joseph had said to them in his interpretation. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. In our reflections today, we want to think about the degradation of prison, and the degradation in which Joseph, this innocent man who had been thrown into prison, who had been taken down, is now finding himself. He is behind bars. Joseph has been mistreated, he has been misrepresented, he has been falsely accused, and now he finds himself in the clink, in the big house, behind bars. Remember, Joseph had been treated unfairly by his own brothers and sold into slavery. Remember, he had become a slave in a foreign land. And in our reflections last week, we discovered that because he fled from Potiphar's wife, he was falsely accused of attempted rape. And as a result, he was imprisoned. But despite being behind bars, despite experiencing the degradation of prison, and prison in those days would be nowhere like what prison is today. You would literally be thrown in a dank, dark, and dirty dungeon. Notwithstanding that, Joseph remained patient and his testimony remained intact. He didn't see himself as a victim, but rather as a victor waiting for his liberty. Why? Because the Lord was with Joseph, and that alone made the prison bearable for Joseph. And as we join Joseph behind the bars in our reflections this week, we see that Joseph is shut up, he's shut down, and he's shut off. But despite all that, Joseph is still serving the Lord. Even in a prison of pain and of human suffering, in a prison, in a dungeon where he was forgotten by many, Joseph was not forgotten by the most important person of all, God himself. And let me just say today that the Lord may take us into prison situations, not actual prisons as such, but situations in which we can feel downcast, in which we may have been misrepresented, into situations where we have perhaps been mistreated, and we can feel imprisoned. We can feel that we are the innocent victim. We can face hardships and trials. Sometimes we, like Joseph, can feel shut up, shut down, and shut off. We can feel that even in our own prison, whatever that might be, others have forgotten that we are in that dark and terrible place. Well, God has not forgotten that you are in that dark and terrible place if you're experiencing today, right now, a prison-like experience. Even though man may forget us in the prisons of life in which we find ourselves, when we are, as it were, behind bars, God never forgets, and God never forsakes us. Be encouraged today if you are feeling in any way behind bars, and let's learn this week from Joseph as we journey with him behind bars in the prison situation he was in.